Buonasera a tutti, benvenuti a questo nuovo appuntamento di appunti di città. Questa sera facciamo qualcosa di diverso, nel senso che diversamente dagli altri incontri avremo un ospite internazionale che si è data disponibile per una intervista. Come sapete, se ci state seguendo in questi mesi, in queste settimane, più o meno ogni 2 settimane con appunti di città lanciamo un tema. In questi giorni stiamo lavorando moltissimo e stiamo dialogando moltissimo con tanti soggetti del territorio sul tema della scuola e sul rapporto tra la scuola e la città, e siamo molto contenti di avere qui da noi questa sera, qui con noi, Jeanette Frisk, che è uno dei 2 soci fondatori dello studio Archilab, che è uno studio basato a Copenhagen, che lavora tantissimo su temi di urban design, su temi di trasformazione, diciamo, di spazi pubblici, ma la loro prospettiva è molto interessante per noi, e lo è in particolar modo, diciamo, rispetto a come stiamo lavorando sul tema della scuola in questi giorni, perché loro lavorano moltissimo con le fasce più giovani della popolazione, lavorano moltissimo con metodi di progettazione collaborativa, di coproduzione, di co-design, e nella loro esperienza hanno intercettato, e poi su queste esperienze hanno costruito anche tutta una serie di ragionamenti, hanno intercettato il tema del rapporto tra diciamo quella che è l'educazione, il percorso pedagogico, la didattica e la dimensione urbana e la forma della città, e ne hanno fatto un metodo di lavoro che è un metodo di progetto, è un modo per lavorare e trasformare la città, ma è anche un metodo per costruire nuove forme di apprendimento. Come vi abbiamo anticipato, l'intervista di questa sera si svolgerà in inglese, quindi io adesso passerei all'inglese per poter dare il giusto benvenuto alla nostra ospite. La saluto. Hello Jeanette, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine.
Nice to have you here. So as you probably heard, I made just a little introduction in Italian in order to allow our followers to know a bit more about you, about Archilab, and then I'm sure that you will tell us more all along our conversation. Just to give you let's say a small introduction and a little framework about the reason why you were invited here. As I anticipated you in Italy in particular, but this is something we find here and there in Europe, the discussion about the post-COVID, well, the consequences of the pandemic is in some way focusing on schools. In Italy in particular, these weeks have been quite hot because of this, because there's a lot of debate about what's going to happen on September. There's a lot of debate about how can we, let's say, adjust or transform our schools, our buildings, what we have, in order to make it more appropriate to welcome differently organized education programs, because we cannot do anything but that. And actually, as the debate is very participated, I would say, from different perspectives, from different positions. There's also a lot of working and a lot of talking about outdoor learning and about the role teaching outside could have in helping us reformulating or reorganizing educational activities, both now that we are facing the summer season and in the long run, as let's say, official schools will restart. I explained in Italian for our Italian audience that we were extremely interested in your work. Of course, on the one side, because of your work as architects and urban designers, because you do value a lot the cooperational dimension, and actually the initial phases of our talk will be focusing on that. But on the other side, of course, we are specifically interested in your work with youngsters, and in the book that you wrote as a collective named The City as Classroom, because in the book and in the reflections that you collect in the book, you do work a lot and discuss a lot about outdoor learning and the relationship between learning outside and let's say, becoming more aware and more capable to establish an active relationship with the built environment, which is for Urban Lab, the organizational work, for something extremely important, as working on urban culture is one of our missions. So I would like to stop talking actually and give you the stage, and I will do it asking you our first question that we were preparing for you, which is as an introduction, if you could tell us how Archilab has, let's say, elaborated or reflected upon the role of architects and urban designers in the society, and what is your position or your opinion towards urban design?
Yeah, thank you for, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this informal online conversation. I mean, to start off with, yes, I'm educated an architect from the Royal Academy here in Copenhagen, which goes a long way back and has a long and fine tradition behind it. But I remember already at school studying to become an architect, wondering where the focus on the people was in our development of buildings primarily. And I remember that wonder sort of continued with me after getting my first position as a finished or an educated architect. And that just kept staying with me. So I asked myself and my husband, actually, Rasmus Frisk, who's also an architect, at a point, what is the role actually of the architect? If it is to design our environment and our physical framework for life, for people, where is the focus on that? And where is the financial focus? Where is the organizational focus? And where are the skills that is needed to do so? And that's basically the wonder or the questions that Archilab is founded on. We call ourselves Archilab Designing Cities with People. So the lab part is, of course, an experimental approach to developing architecture and urban design. And designing with people is, of course, because we believe that we need to involve the community of the areas that we are developing. They know how their lives is lived. They know what they need. If we don't submerge ourselves into that knowledge as architects, we are grasping in blind. So basically that's our approach, always to design spaces and cities with people. The focus on the youth and therefore also the school system or learning processes has sort of originated from one of our strategic approaches whenever we develop projects. We in order to do it democratically, we believe that we have to involve a variety group of people. And we believe that the young people should be involved also because they are a growing population in our, or a big group in our cities and our urban areas. And we do not know a lot about what they prefer or what they want. And since they are users of our spaces, they should be involved also. So that was sort of where it initiated the focus on involving the youth also. In order to get like a broad segment of young people or citizens in general involved in our processes, we often go through the schools in the local areas where we work. So we start by making a stakeholder analysis, and on that map we always try to locate the schools and the institutional, the learning institutions in areas. Because when we integrate the involvement on the school curriculum, we actually also get the resources of the teachers working in the schools. When the kids start getting the sense that their ideas and views are taken seriously into the development of their local area, whether it's the schoolyard or a larger area surrounding the school, we create ownership amongst them. They can actually learn a lot as we involve them. They can learn about math and history and social science and arts and all these different subjects on the school curriculum are actually integrated in the development of spaces. So it's like an obvious way of working and involvement and involving like a broad segment of society at the same time. And when we started doing that, we realized, hey, we talked to the teachers and they were like, but suddenly they are much more involved, or the students that are normally not that involved are suddenly more involved and understand the way of working. It's more project-based. We go outside, we learn better when we're outside. They experience the practical use of their different subjects in a sort of interdisciplinary way. So that started for us, initiated the idea of the book, our recent book, The City as a Classroom, where we explore the advantages of actually not only integrating the citizen involvement and the design of spaces on the school curriculum, but also in general how to use the city, add an extra layer of life. So not just talk about commercial life or recreational life in urban spaces, but also putting the learning layer, the learning aspects, the informal and formal learning activities into our urban spaces. That is only an added value. Yeah, I'm just talking and talking now. And also, I think I'm going into your next question.
Well, actually, you were entering our next question, because the question was how you got to, in some way, frame the city as classroom concept. I mean, I was browsing a bit your activities, and I saw that also Rasmus was talking in a TED conference explaining this idea of being definitely less detached from people as architects, as professionals, as something we call experts of city. It is true that we have a curriculum which is in cities, but it is also true that there are so many different kind of expertises that come from citizens, that come from people that normally are not included in the process. So, and I really share this. So that's why I also liked really a lot your perspective on let's say on how we can make our profession as architects. But I found it extremely interesting that in some way this was how to say intertwining with this idea of having the city as an incredibly diverse platform to learn, because so built environment is important, and having some tools or some I would call them some glasses that help the youngsters to better understand what they see, and to understand that what they see is not the same thing everywhere, because the city is diversity as an initial statement. I think it's very interesting. So if you could tell us more about well, how the book was born, and maybe making us some examples about the experiences. I mean, you say in the forward of the book that this is coming from your experience. So this is not, I mean, it is of course a theoretical reflection, because you were reflecting upon your experience, but it is based on I would say on real facts. So if you could tell us a few things about the real facts that were in some way bringing you into this and pushing you into the exploration of this world.
Yeah. So first off, of course, for us, the mission of involving people, involving a larger group of people, involving especially the youth, that is, of course, one sort of a stepping point for us towards this focus. Another one is that we were part of a larger project in Copenhagen. We were on a team together with the landscape architects called SLA here in Copenhagen, And they're very skilled at designing these sort of the places between the buildings, with the focus on how nature can perform in a sustainable and a climate adaptive way. So this competition, we were on the team with SLA and we won it. And the project was to design a new park that could hold the water of these 100-year floods. So that was sort of the overall objective. Then on each end of the parks, there was 2 schools. So the objective for the project was also to design the park as a learning space. And before we sort of before SLA started the design of the park, we did a research project for Copenhagen municipality. They wanted to investigate the potential of using the surrounding green spaces and urban spaces for the schools in the area as a way of trying to deal with the capacity issue that we have in the dense city areas. We're located at Nørrebro in Copenhagen, which is the most dense area of Copenhagen, with the least green spaces around. And but the demand on schools is very high because families tend to stay in the city or move back to the city with their kids. So so they wanted to test out, are there more possibilities of dealing with this capacity issue than just building new schools? Because that's of course a more expensive. So our research was about trying to investigate how can we use the surrounding adjacent urban spaces, both gray and green spaces in the learning, for learning projects as a classroom. What kind of capacity do we need, but also what are the issues, not just what are the advantages that students get outside and get fresh air, and when their activities are more sensible, then the learning stick to the brain faster and for a longer time, and all these good reasons why to go outside and learn. But also the, how do you say, the challenges. It's not just about the design of the space. It's not just about how to get there, but it's also about the organizational changes that have to happen inside the school system. How do you administrate the shift between inside learning and outdoor learning? How can the school organize it so they know when there's available free space inside, or how do we avoid that 500 students gather in park at the same time? And so it was a broad research project that then informed the design of the park at the end. And that initiated we sort of opened our eyes to all the good reasons why, not just for our future generations, because of course when we start living more dense, we tend to build higher. And I've seen examples also in Copenhagen, even though we have a quite sort of flat city, where we build schools, vertical schools, right? So there's something about the physical disconnect for students and young people to society, one thing, and to nature, of course. And then there's the whole reconnecting with society. If you go outside and you actually are in nature, you get fresh air, you meet people, you see people, you investigate, the whole learning process changes. It's much more project-based and interdisciplinary when you go outside. So there's something about, it benefits learning, it benefits society, it benefits the environment. There's so many good reasons. And then we thought it was interesting to add that layer to the focus on urban design. What kind of consequences does that have for our future urban spaces? How can we design them so they are both spaces for recreational purposes and gathering purposes, but also learning purposes? So a lot of interesting sort of, it was kind of an awakening to be able to make this research project for the Copenhagen municipality that then informed the design of this new park. And then we just realized we have to unfold this, because it's not just about using nature as a space for learning. That's normally something you connect with outdoor learning. Then you go to a forest or a lake and you fish and whatever. And but it's so much more than that. It's also because you can do it on different levels, right? You could just go outside for a class, get fresh air, use the city as a classroom where you could do it inside, but you could also do it outside. Wouldn't matter. You would just get the fresh air. But then there's also the way that projects and teaching can be designed, so it's much more holistic and maybe a more sort of long-term learning process or project. And then there's the whole thing about for young people actually to be part of designing their surroundings as a way of not only using the city as a classroom, but also, how do you say, performing their democratic right in shaping it. So that's the sort of the far end of the spectrum. And then you've got the sort of just the everyday use of the adjacent spaces around the school. Yeah. And everything in between, we've sort of investigated into this sort of explorative publication, the city as a classroom.
Yeah, thank you. That's extremely interesting because this is really, during our latest program, cultural programmation that we did during these last days, we had the chance to interview some school directors here in Torino, which are actually trying to design how to reopen the schools. It is kind of interesting because the situation in the city is extremely different according to the different neighborhoods. We have also extremely different conditions in terms of age of the buildings. So we have some buildings that were built at the end of the 19th century, which of course have some typological characters that are there to be seen by anyone, while there are others that were built during the 60s and the 70s, which are in some way offering much more generous spaces, which maybe have open air spaces which are more, let's say, much bigger than if we compare them to the city center, for example. And it was kind of interesting because the two women that we interviewed were in both cases, even if from different perspectives, really reflecting upon the relationship between the school and the city. So the idea on the one case, the case of the woman who had a school in the city center, with this idea of letting the school go outside. She said my spaces are kind of narrow, I've got a lot of kids, so I cannot really think of facing the emergency by enlarging the space. I have no space, so I cannot do it. And she has established, or she is establishing a much closer conversation with all the different actors in the city. So cultural institutions, NGOs, institutions coming from the municipalities, private sectors, and so forth and so on, in order to let the school go outside. The other case was kind of the opposite, because the other director we talked about says, I've got a big school, I've got portions of my school which are empty because the demographic shift has changed, and so the current conditions for me are that I might rely on more space, but in my case, going outside might be more difficult on the one side because they are more peripheral, so they should move quite a lot in the city, and now it's difficult with public transportation and so forth and so on. But she also said something that was in some way that made me think as an architect, as an urban planner. She said we could go outside, but we would like to rely on a bit more beauty around us. So I would love to bring the students outside, but I would really, in some way, like to have them taking advantage of a different kind of built environment. And instead, I think that your perspective is much more active, or might introduce more action, because we could discuss all together about the quality of our built environment and made out of this, an opportunity for learning for everyone. for the students and the teaching staff. And I think that this is coming out quite clearly from your book, because there are so many voices that you were in some way intercepting. So my question for you is if you could tell us more about how you were establishing a dialogue with so many different voices, because of course the teachers have a perspective, but the students shouldn't feel like on a second level in this conversation. This is the conversation between pairs. And so how you were in some way facilitating this is extremely interesting for us.
Yeah, I mean, we have a set of different sort of project examples, but maybe I will refer to the latest project we're working on right now, where we are developing a city strategy for a small town of northern Jutland here in Denmark. And the population of the town is 8,000 people. And our task is to develop a strategy or a plan for how the small town should develop over the next years. And the reason we were the consultants to do this job for this municipality was our focus on the youth, mainly. But of course, we never just focus on one group, but we have sort of a main focus on the youth, because this small town has actually several schools and several sort of cultural and educational institutions. So that's part of their profile. They are that region's youth city. So basically we start from within the municipality and do a stakeholder mapping, not just the resourceful community members, but also the people within the municipality with knowledge and resources. And then we start designing a process together with the client, of course. How do we make sure to involve everyone, and how do we communicate about our activities and so forth. And then very early on, we have a meeting also with all the schools, the headmasters and the main institutions and schools in this small town, and communicate about the project, communicate the value of it, of participating, and the learning values also, and how we sort of guide them of how they can use it in the curriculum, and how the teachers can use their own subject into this project. And then we start moving down, and then we start sort of map the teachers that voluntarily want to participate, that feel they have the time and feel they have the students that can participate, or that they have a project going on that is relevant for this, the participation in this project also. And then we start together with the teachers planning and designing the workshops. It's about creating ownership toward the project in every line of people we're working with, and in that way we might start up top, but we roll our way down into the community, the local society, and then we start with the workshops. Sometimes the teachers use some time without us present and start unfolding the project, activating the students. And then we have some workshops. Sometimes these projects can go on for half a year normally, where we might, do some activities in the class for 3 times or something. And every time we make sure that it informs our final product. Every time we meet people, whether it's a community workshop or it's a workshop within a classroom. And at the end, we either make like placemaking together with the youth, so they're part of making some temporary installations that in some way unfold the ideas that they've been part of creating. In that sense, we also start making placemaking around these areas, this town, and what happens is that then the teachers start using, because of this process, because of the ideas and the focus on using the city as a classroom within our projects, they start using the city as a classroom. So they start, we have a focus on changing culture but also changing places. I mean, so that was maybe a long explanation of how we normally working our processes. It's very important that the teachers are on board, that they feel they have the time and the resources, and then slowly throughout these processes, because something happens, because they can see that the ideas inform the final product, and because we build something out of the ground, activate the spaces we're talking about, they start using them and change starts happening.
Okay, thank you. And how about the students? I mean, one thing that I really appreciated from the book and from, I mean, by browsing your projects, you have done a lot of different things, I mean, there's this idea of a highly democratic involvement of the youngsters in the practical transformation of the city, which is to me quite an important issue. I mean, it's not simply establishing a discussion, it's acting upon the physical dimension of the city, and this is probably making a change in terms of, let's say, in generative terms. So this is much more interesting than simply discussing about how you want it. You can simply do it and then show us how do you want things. So how I mean, there was a first time, there's always a first time for everything. So how was your first time with the students, and how, if it is the case, of course, and how have you how to say, evolved your techniques or your methods according to what you learned through experience?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's very important in every project that you show that you take them, the students or the young people or even everyone we involve, that you take them seriously. So there's a kind of I mean, you have to be a good listener.
Yeah.
You have to practice your ability to go behind what people are saying sometimes, right? You want me to sort of exemplify the first time with where we are now. I mean, I think we started some 7 years ago, and I remember some of the first projects where we could really see that, because these were just learning projects, nothing was to be built out of what I remember they were working in a school in Copenhagen. We were helping them trying to redesign their schoolyard, but it was just an imaginative project. Nothing was to be built at the end. And even though we tried to build something temporarily with boxes and we put up signs, we knew that in order for them to be 100% motivated, or at least more than they were, we needed someone to listen to them that had power or in a high position. So already then we knew we had to invite some politicians to the sort of the exhibition of their ideas, and that helped. Having the sort of taking their ideas seriously and having that exhibition and rolling out a red carpet and inviting some politicians, because we had a local election at that time, so it wasn't difficult to get some people to, take some pictures with some young people and say, we listen to the young people and what the ideas they create, right? But that's just a small trick that really helps, because what we have to do when we start these processes is to build trust. There's a lot of okay, now the adults are coming again and asking us different questions. But nothing will happen. Creating trust is the first barrier we have to sort of go beyond. So of course it helps whenever there's a real project at the end. That's sort of a manifestation of, okay, the adults are listening to us. Something will be built, right? That is something we have really worked with over the years. So whenever someone approaches us saying, can you design a learning project? We are like, yes, but can you find a little bit of money just to realize some parts of their ideas? That would really help, right? That's something we focused on. In terms of designing methods and developing methods, at some point, we always feel the more the merrier. So the more students or more young people or more local community we can involve, the better. I mean, the more voices we can bring into these processes, the better. And at one point we were missing some hands to actually be part of this facilitation, right? So we have designed a board game, that works as a traditional sort of a board game where you sit around the table, 5 to 6 people, and you are guided through the design thinking method when you develop the areas that are relevant for the project. And that has been a great success. So with the need of more hands, we actually developed this method, but we found out that it helps, it helps the conversation. It helps create empathy across different interests around a table. We can actually bring a lot of people together at the same time in large workshops. We have had workshops of more than 100 people at the same time. And we can actually gather all the data and all the information and the knowledge afterwards and incorporate that in our projects. There is something about how the game progresses. So you start with an introduction of everyone around the table. Sometimes, often, people don't know each other, and that's the point. And then you start presenting your relationship to the area on the map, your local area, where you like to be, where you don't like to be, the things you feel that are lacking. And then slowly you start creating consensus around the table, or at least an understanding across different interests or opinions. And then at the end, you have to develop ideas that accommodate solutions for all around the table. And it's at that sense, it becomes a creative and constructive dialogue you have around a creative workshop. And at the end, you, of course, present your ideas to the majority or the full group that are playing the game at the same time. That has been a tool we almost implement in all our projects, even if it's adults or if it's high-level stakeholders or if the objective is to bring people together across ages. It really works well. So that's something that has come out of some of our early projects also. Of course, what has happened over the years is that we have developed a language for our different, of how to design these processes to fit almost any situation, but they are always adapted to the current situation. I mean, there's nothing one size fits all for this. So there's something about methods, awareness of what works, what tricks do we have to use to motivate people. We've also developed an app for that because we know that the younger generations are more on their phone. So we have developed like a creative design app. So you can take a picture of where you are and you can start creating an idea, sort of a collage, and then you upload it to this platform and you start commenting on each other's projects or ideas and start backing them up and crowdsourcing in a way the ideas that are generated. So methods like the game and the app, a language that fits, I would say, almost any situation, whether it's a school, a learning situation, or high-level stakeholders on a municipal or even governmental level. So that's I would say the 3 sort of main things that we carry with us and we keep developing.
Thank you very much. You were actually anticipating one of my last question, because our time is running and we have just a couple of minutes more. So I would go for a couple of conclusions because I think this was an extremely interesting conversation. But you were naming, well, a couple of things. One thing that was actually what I wanted to ask you, which is about the role of technology. So there's a lot of discussion about the relationship we have with technology, but I found it quite interesting by browsing your site, by seeing your practical experience, that there's also a role for technology, which is a productive role, which is not simply let's browse on Google where we are and let's see us from the moon. But you were mentioning it just a couple of minutes ago about the fact that the technology can also be used to enhance or to activate or to switch some mechanism on in order to find new ways of involvement and establish new forms of conversation. Another point that was extremely interesting, I mean, for me as a member of Urban Lab Torino, which is an organization which is working a lot on dissemination, on public communication, what you said about languages. I mean, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but also learning how to listen and learning how to speak to the different interlocutors, let's call them like that, is a job, which is, and it is something that probably is not so, I mean, this is not taught in the Italian university. When you learn architecture, you learn how to build a building. You do not learn how to talk to people. And so this is quite an important thing. And then you said two extremely important words, which are empathy and trust. So this idea of having, I mean, if we want to have a good basis for a honest conversation, trust is important, and empathy, mutual listening is important. And I really think that this is an element which is a bit missing in our local debate at the moment concerning how it could transform our schools. A lot of politicians are talking about it, a lot of journalists are talking about it. Surely a lot of Italian moms are talking about it, but so few people were asking the kids' opinion concerning that. So they were remaining in a way aside. So this is quite, I think this is quite stimulating for us in order to bring about our local debate concerning issues. So I really have to thank you, because you were adding so much to our local debate. You were adding so much to our personal knowledge of this issue, and I really hope that we will have the chance sooner or later to have you in person in Torino.
I would love it.
With your nice staff, so that you have, I mean, the office is made out of different skills and typology of professionals. So it will be a pleasure to have you here once. Nobody knows how and when at the moment, but I hope this is gonna happen. Just a couple of words in Italian to say goodbye to our audience. Io ringrazio tutti quelli che ci hanno seguito. Come sempre la diretta sarà disponibile sul nostro canale YouTube nell'arco di qualche giorno. Ringrazio ancora anche in italiano Jeanette e Archilab per la disponibilità, e vi rimando alle prossime settimane con i prossimi appuntamenti di città. Grazie a tutti e buona serata.